The rain came down hard that afternoon in Seoul, drumming against cracked pavement like a warning no one wanted to hear. Minjun Park was crouched outside the electronics repair shop, wiping water from a display case when the boy appeared. Not walking, running. His small sneakers slapped wet concrete in desperate rhythm. Behind him, 3 men in black coats moved like shadows with purpose. The child's eyes were wild with fear, mouth open, gasping for air. Minjun straightened, his rag falling from his hands. Something in his chest tightened, a memory he couldn't name but had never forgotten. The boy stumbled at the corner, arms flailing, and a small object flew from his pocket, skittering across the pavement. A USB drive, scratched, ordinary. It stopped at Minjun's feet. The men were closing in fast, their footsteps heavy, purposeful. The boy pressed himself against the brick wall, trapped. "Give it here." The lead man's voice was flat, businesslike. Rain dripped from the brim of his hat. "It has nothing to do with you." Minjun's hand closed around the USB. It was cold against his palm. His other hand reached out, pulling the trembling child behind him. The boy's small fingers gripped the back of Minjun's jacket. "The child is so scared." Minjun's voice was steady, despite the hammering in his ribs. "I won't return this." The man stepped closer. His eyes were dead, the kind of eyes that had seen too much and felt too little. "You're making a mistake, repair boy." "Maybe." Minjun kept his body between them and the child. His heart was slamming against his chest, but his feet stayed planted. But not today. For a long moment, the alley held its breath. Rain hissed against metal awnings. Somewhere, a door slammed. A motorcycle revved in the distance. Then the men stepped back, slowly, their faces promising this wasn't over. The lead man pointed at Minjun. "We'll remember you." They disappeared into the gray afternoon, leaving only wet footprints and a tension that clung to Minjun's skin like oil. The boy looked up at him, shaking so hard his teeth chattered. "They'll take them," he whispered, voice cracking with terror. "All of them. The list. It has all their names." Minjun knelt down, trying to calm him. "What list? Who are they taking?" But the child's eyes darted to the street. Fear overwhelmed him. Before Minjun could stop him, the boy twisted free and ran, vanishing into the maze of Seoul's back streets like smoke. Minjun stood alone in the rain, the USB warm in his palm now, pulsing like something alive. He looked down at it, just a simple device, plastic and circuits, but the boy's words echoed in his head. "They'll take them, all of them." He didn't know it yet, but he'd just stepped into a war that would change everything. A war between those who sold children like inventory and those who'd die to stop them. Minjun slipped the USB into his pocket and walked back into the repair shop. The bell above the door chimed softly. Mr. Kim, the elderly owner, looked up from his workbench. "Who was that?" "Just a kid." Minjun's voice sounded distant to his own ears. "Running from something." Mr. Kim studied him with knowing eyes. "And you helped." "I couldn't just watch." The old man nodded slowly. "That's how it starts, the choice to see. Once you see, you can't unsee." He returned to his soldering iron. "Be careful, Minjuna. Sometimes helping costs more than we expect." Minjun touched the USB in his pocket. "I know." But he didn't. Not yet. Minjun's apartment was barely bigger than a storage closet. One window overlooking a narrow alley, a bed that doubled as a couch, a desk cluttered with circuit boards, tangled wires and soldering tools. The walls were thin enough to hear his neighbors arguing 3 units down. He locked the door behind him and sat down, his shirt still damp from the rain. The USB felt heavier than it should, like it carried weight beyond its physical form. For 5 minutes, he just stared at it. "Just look," he told himself. "You need to know what you're dealing with." He plugged it into his ancient laptop. The screen flickered once, twice, then stabilized. A single folder appeared, password protected. But whoever had encrypted it had done a sloppy job. Min-Jun had been fixing computers since he was 12. Breaking basic encryption was muscle memory. The folder opened. 37 files, each one labeled with a name, an age, and a date. Keto, 8 years old. Transport, May 15th. Amara, 6 years old. Transport, May 15th. Jin-Soo, 9 years old. Transport, May 18th. May, 7 years old. Transport, May 20th. His stomach dropped. The room tilted. "Oh my God." The words came out barely louder than a breath. His hands started shaking. Who am I supposed to tell? He scrolled through the list. Each name was accompanied by photos, school pictures, surveillance images, even medical records. Detailed information about families, neighborhoods, daily routines. This wasn't amateur work. This was systematic. Industrial, children. 37 children. Scheduled, documented. Packaged like cargo headed for destinations labeled only as Buyer A, Buyer B, Buyer C. Min-Jun felt bile rise in his throat. He'd heard whispers about this kind of thing, human trafficking, international crime rings. But it had always felt distant, something that happened in news reports, not in the streets where he walked every day. But this was real. These were real children, with real faces staring back at him from the screen. He thought of the boy in the alley, Keto. That had to be the child who ran, which meant these weren't just files. They were countdown timers, death sentences. The first transport was scheduled for tomorrow night. Min-Jun reached for his phone. The police. He had to call the police. Then the glass door exploded inward. Min-Jun threw himself sideways as shards sprayed across the floor. A bullet punched through the plaster above his desk, sending dust and debris raining down. He didn't think, grabbed the USB, yanked it from the laptop, ran. The hallway was a blur of peeling wallpaper and flickering lights. He could hear boots pounding up the stairs behind him. Heavy military-grade boots that meant these weren't regular thugs. His door splintered as someone kicked it fully open. "Target's mobile, east stairwell." Min-Jun took the stairs 3 at a time, his lungs burning. Outside, a black SUV screeched around the corner, headlights cutting through the dusk like searchlights. He dove into the nearest alley, heart slamming against his ribs. Behind him, footsteps pounded. Voices shouted in a language he didn't understand. Russian, maybe, or Eastern European. More men. How many were hunting him? He clutched the USB in his fist. Every instinct screamed at him to drop it. Leave it in a dumpster. Throw it into the sewer. Let someone else deal with this nightmare. But he thought of Keto's terrified eyes. They'll take them, all of them. And he thought of himself at 8 years old, cold, hungry, sleeping in cardboard boxes, wondering if anyone would ever look for him, wondering if he mattered at all. No, he wasn't leaving it behind. Not the USB, not those children, not the hope that someone, somewhere, would do the right thing. Minjun ran deeper into the labyrinth of Seoul's forgotten places. Places where people like him learned to disappear. The rain started again, heavier now, washing away his tracks. But not the fear clawing at his throat. His shoes were falling apart. His lungs felt like they were filled with broken glass. He didn't know where he was going, only that stopping meant dying, and dying meant those children had no one. So he ran. Through alleys that smelled of rotting garbage and old fry oil, past closed shops and sleeping homeless encampments, under bridges where the city's forgotten gathered around barrel fires. He ran until his legs gave out, until he collapsed against a wall in an area he didn't recognize, gasping for air, the USB still clutched in his bleeding hand. Behind him, in the distance, he could hear them searching, methodical, patient. They weren't giving up. Neither was he. If this story is already pulling at your heart, hit that subscribe button. These nights are made for stories that matter, and you won't want to miss what happens next. The abandoned train station smelled of rust and old concrete. Years ago, it had been part of Seoul's metro expansion project. Started with optimism, abandoned when funding dried up. Now it was just another forgotten space in a city that moved too fast to look back. Minjun stumbled into the main hall, his lungs burning, legs trembling. He'd lost the SUV 3 blocks back, but the feeling of being hunted hadn't left. It crawled under his skin like electricity. He was cornered now. The far end of the platform, boarded up exits, no way out except back the way he came. His phone was dead, his apartment was compromised, and 37 children had less than 24 hours before the first transport. Minjun slid down against the cold tile wall, trying to catch his breath, trying to think. That's when the flashlight beams sliced through the darkness. But these weren't the same men. The woman who emerged from the shadows moved like she owned not just the room, but the air inside it. Tall, dark-skinned, her presence filled the space before she even spoke. She wore a long black coat that moved with her like water. Behind her, 4 figures fanned out, professional, silent, lethal, not thugs, operators. Minjun's heart, which had finally started to slow, kicked back into overdrive. Zaria Okafor didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Why is a poor guy like you holding evidence worth millions of dollars? Minjun pressed his back against the wall, trying to stand but failing. His legs were jelly. I don't know what you're talking about. The USB. She stepped closer, her boots clicking against the concrete. The one you took from the boy, the one Jonas Cade's men are tearing Seoul apart to find. She tilted her head, studying him like he was a puzzle with pieces that didn't fit. You know what's on it? He swallowed. Children, 37 children. Something flickered in her eyes. So you looked. I had to know. And now you're running. Smart. She stopped a few feet away. But not smart enough. Cade's men will find you eventually. They always do. How do you? Minjun's voice cracked. Who are you? Someone who's been tracking that list for 6 months. Zaria's voice was ice wrapped in steel. And now some laptop repairman stumbles into the middle of my operation. She gestured to one of her team members, a man with a scar running down his jaw. Marcus here thinks you're working for Cade, that this is all a setup. It's not. I know. Zaria cut him off. If you were, you'd already be dead. Cade doesn't do elaborate traps. He just eliminates problems. She crouched down, bringing herself to eye level with Minjun. Up close, her eyes weren't just hard, they were haunted. So I'll ask again, why are you still holding it? Minjun looked at the USB in his hand. His knuckles were white from gripping it so hard. Because it's information about children. His voice was barely a whisper. I won't give it to them. Silence filled the station. Even the distant drip of water seemed to pause. Zarya stared at him, really looked like she was seeing past the scared, exhausted man in front of her to something underneath, something familiar. Marcus stepped forward. Queen, we don't have time for this. He's a liability. Shut up, Marcus. Zarya didn't look away from Minjun. You could have thrown it away. Run faster without it. I know. So why didn't you? Minjun met her eyes. Because I was one of those kids once. The words came out raw, unfiltered. I know what it feels like to be on a list, to be inventory, to wonder if anyone's coming. His jaw tightened. No one came for me either. Zarya went very still. The air in the station shifted. Her team felt it. The way their queen's energy changed when something hit close to bone. She stood slowly. Come with me. What? Minjun and Marcus spoke simultaneously. You heard me. Zarya turned, her coat swirling. Let's open it together, see what Cade's hiding. Queen? Marcus protested. We can't just bring in some random. She silenced him with a look that could cut glass. The USB chose him. The boy, Keto, gave it to a stranger rather than keeping it himself. That means something. She glanced back at Minjun. Maybe it means the universe is tired of me doing this alone. Minjun pushed himself to his feet, every muscle screaming. Who are you? Someone who destroys people like Jonas Cade. Zarya's voice softened just slightly. I dismantle trafficking rings, human trafficking specifically. Children. She paused. It's personal. The police are compromised. Half of them are on Cade's payroll. The other half are too scared to act. She started walking toward the far tunnel. If you want those children to live, you'll follow me now. Because running won't save them, and the police won't either. Minjun looked at the USB in his palm, at the woman who'd just offered him something between a threat and a lifeline. Then at the empty platform behind him, the place he'd run to when he had nowhere else to go. No choice, not really. Okay, he said quietly, but I'm not leaving until I know they're safe. Zarya paused mid-step. Then, almost imperceptibly, she smiled. We'll see if you survive long enough to make demands, repair boy. She walked into the darkness. Her team followed, Marcus shooting Minjun a warning glare that said one wrong move. And despite every warning screaming in his head, Minjun followed the Mafia queen into a world he'd spent his whole life avoiding. Into a war fought in shadows. Into a place where the lines between justice and revenge blurred until you couldn't tell them apart. But also into something else. Something he'd been searching for without knowing. Purpose, partnership, and maybe, if they survived, a different kind of family. The safe house was hidden beneath a shuttered restaurant in Itaewon. The kind of place that looked abandoned from the outside but hummed with life below ground. Concrete walls reinforced with steel, minimal furniture. Banks of computers lining one side of the room, screens glowing with data streams and surveillance footage. Maps covered the opposite wall, marked with pins and notes in multiple languages. Minjun stood in the center, feeling wildly out of place. Zarya's team moved with practiced efficiency, securing entrances, running diagnostics, checking perimeters. They didn't look at him, except with suspicion. Zarya took the USB, plugged it into her system. Her face remained impassive as the files loaded, but Minjun saw her fingers tighten on the desk edge. The tendons in her neck stood out. This is the list Jonas Cade uses to sell children across the border. Her voice was low, controlled, but underneath it was a current of rage. Transport dates, buyers, routes, pickup locations. She pulled up a map overlaying the USB data with her own intelligence. Red dots appeared across Seoul and beyond. Warehouses, transit hubs, safe houses. He's been building this network for years. 37 children this cycle alone. Before that, she clicked through older files she'd compiled. Hundreds, maybe thousands. Minjun felt sick. Then we call the police, give them everything. A bitter sound escaped her throat, not quite a laugh. The police have been bought. Half of them are on Cade's payroll. She turned to face him. You just entered a battle you don't understand. There is no way back. They saw your face. They know where you live. You're marked now. Marcus crossed his arms, his scar pulling tight. Why would Queen trust a poor guy? He spat the words like an accusation. He could be one of Cade's plants, a mole. Another team member, a woman with sharp features named Adisa, nodded. He's a liability. We should secure the intel and cut him loose. Cut him loose, Marcus scoffed. He's seen our base. He knows our faces. The implication hung heavy. Minjun felt the walls closing in. But Zarya raised her hand. Silence fell immediately. It's not because I trust you. She looked directly at Minjun. It's because this USB chose you. And that boy Kito, he gave it to you, not me, not the police, not anyone with power or resources. Something flickered in her eyes. That means something. It means he's naive, Marcus muttered. Or it means he's exactly what we've forgotten how to be. Zarya pulled up a chair. Sit down, repair boy. If we're doing this, we need to move fast. Minjun hesitated, then sat. What do you need me to do? Stay alive, Zarya said flatly, and don't slow us down. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was permission to stay, and for now that was enough. Over the next hours, Minjun watched Zarya work. She was brilliant, tactical, precise, ruthless when needed, but never careless. She cross-referenced the USB files with her own intelligence, building a three-dimensional map of Cade's entire operation. Warehouses, transit points, corrupt officials, border crossings. Here, Zarya pointed to a location on the outskirts of Seoul. This is where they're holding the children before transport. Security is tight. Guards rotate every 6 hours. Cameras on all entrances. Minjun leaned in. How many guards? At least 12. She glanced at him. You ever been in a fight? No. Then you stay in the van. I can help. You'll help by not dying. Zarya's voice softened, just barely. These children need witnesses, people who'll testify when this goes to court, people whose hands are clean. She met his eyes. You're more valuable alive than heroic. It was the first time she'd acknowledged his worth beyond the USB. Minjun nodded slowly. Okay, but I want to be there, even if I'm just in the van. Deal. As the team dispersed to prepare gear and weapons, Marcus approached Zarya. His voice was low, but Minjun could still hear it. You're really doing this, bringing a civilian into our operation. Zarya didn't look up from her screen. He risked his life for a USB he doesn't benefit from. You think that's common? Marcus grunted. It's naive. Maybe. Zarya shut down the computer. Or maybe it's exactly what I've forgotten how to be, what we've all forgotten. She finally looked at him. When was the last time you did something without calculating the cost? Marcus was quiet. That's what I thought. Zarya stood. He's not Mafia. He's not trained. But he's the first person in years who's looked at this war and decided to fight without expecting payment. She paused. Maybe that's the kind of person we need on our side. Across the room, Min-jun pretended not to listen, but inside, something warm bloomed in his chest. Not quite trust, not yet, but recognition, the beginning of something that felt like belonging. The warehouse sat on the edge of the industrial district, surrounded by shipping containers and darkness. No streetlights, no witnesses, just the kind of place people disappeared into and never came out of. Zarya's team moved at 2 a.m. Min-jun stayed in the van as ordered, watching through the cracked window as they approached. They moved like ghosts, silent, efficient, deadly. Zarya led from the front, her movements so fluid they seemed choreographed. The guards never saw them coming. One by one, they were neutralized, swift, precise strikes that left them unconscious but alive. No unnecessary violence. Just enough to clear the path. Zarya had been clear about that. We're not executioners, she'd said. We're liberators. There's a difference. Through the radio in his ear, Min-jun heard Zarya's voice. We're in. 12 children confirmed. Ages 5 to 10, they're scared. Min-jun's chest tightened. Can I? Stay put. Her voice was firm. We're almost. A child's scream cut through the night. High-pitched, terrified. The sound of someone breaking. Min-jun didn't think. Didn't calculate, didn't weigh risks against rewards. He just moved. He opened the van door and ran. Inside the warehouse, dim overhead lights cast long shadows across concrete floors. The children were huddled in the corner, thin, dirty, wearing mismatched clothes that hung off their small frames. Eyes wide with fear. Some were crying. Others were too scared to cry. Zarya's team was trying to calm them, but the kids pressed back against the wall, trembling. They'd learned that adults couldn't be trusted, that hands reached out to hurt, not help. Min-jun entered slowly. He kept his movements small, non-threatening. He knelt down, making himself their size. It's okay, he said softly in Korean. Then in broken English, then in Mandarin, one of the few phrases he'd learned from Mr. Kim. Uncle is here, you're safe now. A little girl, maybe 5 years old, stared at him. Her face was streaked with tears. Her lip quivered. Min-jun smiled gently. I know you're scared. I was scared too when I was little. He showed them his empty hands. But I promise, we're going to get you out. No one's going to hurt you anymore. The girl took a tentative step forward, then another. Then she was running, throwing her small arms around his neck, her whole body shaking with sobs. The other children followed. They swarmed him, clinging like he was the first safe thing they'd touched in weeks. Min-jun held them, his throat tight, his eyes burning. He whispered reassurances in every language he knew and some he didn't. Just sounds, comfort, the promise that someone saw them. Across the warehouse, Zarya watched. Marcus stood beside her, his expression unreadable. He's good with them, Marcus admitted grudgingly. Natural. But Zarya didn't respond. She was seeing something else. a memory rising from depths she usually kept locked. Herself, small and terrified, in a refugee camp in Burundi. Smoke in the air, screams in the distance, her mother's blood still warm on her hands. She'd waited for someone to kneel down, to promise safety, to say that everything would be okay. No one ever did. He has a way to make the children trust, she thought, watching Minjun cradle a sobbing boy. I don't have that gift. I lost it somewhere between survival and revenge. Minjun looked up and met her eyes across the warehouse. For a moment, something passed between them. Understanding, shared pain, a recognition of what they'd both survived and what it had cost them. Zaria's radio crackled. "Queen, we have movement. 2 blocks out, multiple vehicles." She snapped back to operational mode. "Let's move. We have 20 minutes before reinforcements arrive." The children trusted Minjun enough to follow. He led them out, one hand holding the smallest girl, the others trailing behind like ducklings. Zaria and her team secured the perimeter, moving with military precision. Outside in the cool night air, Minjun helped the children into a separate van. One Zaria had arranged with a legitimate child welfare contact. A kind-faced woman named Mrs. Han waited inside with blankets and warm milk. The kids clung to Minjun, reluctant to let go. "You'll be safe now," he promised, his voice thick. "Mrs. Han will take care of you. She's good. She's kind." The little girl who'd hugged him first squeezed his hand. "Will you come?" His heart broke a little. "I can't, but I'll make sure you're okay. I promise." "Do you promise? Her eyes were so hopeful it hurt. "I promise." As the van pulled away, Minjun stood watching until the taillights disappeared into Seoul's maze of streets. His hands were shaking, not from fear, from the weight of what he'd just witnessed. 12 children who'd been hours away from being sold like livestock. 12 lives that would now have a chance. Zaria approached him. "You didn't stay in the van?" "I know." "You disobeyed a direct order." "I know." Minjun turned to face her. "Are you going to kick me out?" She studied him for a long moment. "No." Her voice was soft. "They trust people who fear for them." It wasn't a reprimand. It was an observation, maybe even admiration. "I'd forgotten that." Minjun's eyes were gentle. "You could do that too. You just forgot how." Zaria's breath caught. No one had ever said that to her, not in her entire life. She was the weapon, the solution, the queen who stood between children and monsters, but never the person who needed reminding that she, too, had once been a terrified child. "Maybe I did," she whispered. It was the first crack in her armor, the first moment of true reciprocity between them. Later, back at the safe house, the team was debriefing. Zaria stood at the window, looking out at Seoul's glittering skyline. Minjun approached quietly. "Tea?" He held out a cup. Steam curled between them. She took it, surprised. "You made tea?" "Found the kettle. Figured we could both use it." He sipped his own. "Rough night." "Every night is rough in this work." But she drank, and the warmth spread through her chest. When was the last time someone had made her tea without being asked? They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Zaria spoke. "I was in a refugee camp when I was 8. Burundi. War came to our village." Her voice was distant, factual. "My parents were killed in crossfire. I watched them die." Minjun listened, not interrupting. "I survived because I learned to stop needing people, to stop trusting." She looked at the tea. "I became useful. learned languages, learned to fight. Eventually, someone recruited me, trained me, gave me purpose. She paused. But watching you with those children tonight, I realized I've forgotten what it looks like to care without calculating the cost. You care, Minjun said gently. You're here, aren't you? Risking everything for kids you've never met. That's different. That's revenge. Is it? He met her eyes. That feels more like you're trying to save the child you used to be. Zarya was silent for a long time. The words settled into her like stones dropped into deep water. Maybe you're right. She turned to face him fully. You remind me of something I thought I'd lost. What's that? Hope. She said it like a confession. The belief that doing the right thing matters, that one person can make a difference. She set down her tea. I've spent so long fighting monsters that I forgot what I was fighting for. Minjun smiled softly. Then let me remind you, every day if I have to. The moment stretched between them, warm, honest, the beginning of something neither of them expected. Trust, earned in inches, respect, built on shared scars, and underneath it all, the first stirrings of something deeper, something that felt like coming home. The next morning arrived with deceptive calm. Sunlight streamed through the safe house windows. Minjun was helping organize the intelligence files when Marcus burst through the door, face grim, phone in hand. We have a problem. Zarya was on her feet instantly. Talk. Cade knows we hit the warehouse. He's retaliating. Marcus pulled up footage on the main screen. He grabbed the boy, Keto. Minjun's blood went cold. What? The security footage was grainy but clear enough. A frightened child being dragged from a playground by two men. The same boy who'd dropped the USB in the rain. The one who'd whispered warnings before running. Keto fought, kicked, screamed, but he was 8 years old against grown men. The video cut off. Zarya's jaw tightened, her hands curled into fists. When? 40 minutes ago, he sent a message. Marcus played the audio file. Jonas Cade's voice was smooth, almost pleasant. The kind of voice that belonged to a businessman, not a predator. Miss Okafor, I believe we have a mutual acquaintance, a little bird who's been chirping about things that don't concern him. A pause, deliberate and cruel. Hand over the USB, every copy, every file, every backup. Or the child disappears. You have 12 hours. I'll send coordinates for the exchange. The recording ended. Silence filled the safe house like water rushing into a sinking ship. Minjun's hands clenched into fists. His voice came out strangled. We have to get him back. It's a trap, Marcus said bluntly. Cade wants the evidence destroyed. If we give it to him, we lose everything. Months of work, dozens of leads. He crossed his arms. And he'll kill the boy anyway. That's what he does. We don't know that. Yes, we do. Zarya's voice was sharp as broken glass. That's how men like Cade operate. The boy is already dead in his mind. We're just the ones who haven't accepted it yet. Minjun stood abruptly, his chair scraping back. Then what? We just abandon him? We think strategically. Like you were abandoned? The words exploded out of Minjun before he could stop them. He saw Zarya flinch, saw the way her whole body went rigid. Immediately, he regretted it. I'm sorry, I didn't mean... No. Zarya turned away, facing the wall covered with mammoths and pins. You're right. I know exactly what it feels like to be expendable. To wait for rescue that never comes. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I swore I'd never let that happen to another child. Adisa stepped forward. Queen, if we walk into Kate's trap, we all die. The entire operation collapses. Every child on that list, all 37, they get sold. Kate wins, and in 6 months, there's another list, another 37, another 100. She's right, Marcus added. 1 child versus 37. The math is brutal, but it's clear. Min-jun shook his head. This isn't about math. This is about a terrified 8-year-old who did the bravest thing imaginable. He took that USB, he ran, he trusted a stranger to do the right thing. His voice cracked. If we abandon him now, what does that make us? Zaria closed her eyes. For the first time since Min-jun met her, she looked uncertain, torn between the tactical choice and the human one, between the mafia queen who calculated costs and the refugee child who remembered what it meant to be forgotten, between who she'd become and who she used to be. There has to be another way, she murmured. Min-jun moved to stand beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Then we find it. Together. She looked at him, this poor laptop repairman who'd stumbled into her war and refused to leave, who'd risked everything for children he didn't know, who saw her not as a queen, but as a person still learning how to be whole, who made her want to be better than her survival instincts. Together, she echoed, and for a moment the word felt like a promise, like a prayer. But then her phone buzzed. Another message from Cade, this time a photo. Keto tied to a chair in a concrete room. Tears streaming down his face. A man's hand visible at the edge of the frame, holding something that glinted. The text read, "TikTok, Ms. Okafor. The boy is wondering why no one's coming. Should I tell him the truth? That you chose data over his life?" Zaria stared at the screen. Her reflection looked back at her. A woman who'd spent 15 years building walls so high, she'd forgotten what it felt like to be human. She made a decision. "I'm going in." "What?" Marcus and Min-jun spoke simultaneously. "I'll meet Cade, exchange myself for the boy." Her voice was steady now, resolved, cold with purpose. "You keep the USB, get it to Interpol, make sure this ends." "That's suicide," Marcus protested. "That's the only way to buy you time." Zaria began prepping her gear, weapons, comms, body armor hidden under street clothes. "Cade wants me more than the evidence. He wants to send a message to everyone who's crossed him. I'll give him that opportunity." "Queen," Adisa started. "That's an order." Zaria's tone left no room for argument. She was back in command mode. The queen, the weapon, the solution. Min-jun grabbed her arm. "You can't." She met his eyes. "You taught me something, Min-jun. You reminded me that some things matter more than survival." A sad smile crossed her face. "Maybe this is how I stop running from the child I used to be." By dying for her? By finally protecting her. Zaria squeezed his hand once, brief, warm, filled with everything she couldn't say. "If there's another way, you'll find it. You're better at hope than I am." She walked toward the door. Min-jun stood frozen, watching her leave. His heart was screaming. His mind was racing. This couldn't be how it ended. Not like this. Marcus put a hand on his shoulder. "She's right. We need to move on, Interpol contact, secure the evidence." "No." Min-jun's voice was firm, cutting through the noise. "We're not losing her, or Keto. We don't have a choice." "There's always a choice." Min-jun turned to the computer. Show me everything we know about Cade's operation, every location, every contact, every pattern. Marcus hesitated. You're not trained for this. I don't need to be trained. I need to be smart. Minjun's fingers flew across the keyboard. And I need you to trust me the way Zarya did. Marcus exchanged glances with Adisa. Then, slowly, he nodded. You're crazier than she is. Maybe. Minjun started pulling up files, cross-referencing locations, building connections. But I'm not letting her walk into that alone. She's spent her whole life saving people. Someone needs to save her. The hours crawled by, like wounded animals dragging themselves toward death. Zarya was gone. The safe house felt emptier without her presence, colder somehow, despite the equipment humming along the walls and the spring sun warm outside. Minjun sat at her desk, fingers flying across the keyboard, his eyes burning from staring at screens. He'd been at it for 4 hours straight, mapping, analyzing, looking for patterns in Cade's operation that everyone else had missed. Cade's using the harbor, Minjun said, pointing at the screen. His voice was hoarse. All his major transports go through there. Look, every date on the USB corresponds to a shipping manifest. He's hiding children in legitimate cargo containers. Marcus leaned in, studying the data. How did we miss this? You weren't looking at the shipping routes. You were focused on the warehouses. Minjun pulled up satellite imagery. But the warehouses are just holding facilities. The real operation happens at the port. If Cade's making a statement with Zarya, that's where he'll do it. Maximum security, his territory, witnesses who are all on his payroll. Adisa joined them, her skepticism fading. It makes sense, but it's a kill box, open space, no cover. If we go in, we're exposed on all sides. Then we don't go in the front. Minjun zoomed in on the satellite image, his finger tracing lines across the screen. There, the maintenance tunnels under the old pier. They were built in the 90s for the original port expansion. Most people don't even know they exist. How do you know that? Marcus asked. Minjun's voice was matter-of-fact. I used to sleep there, when I was on the streets, before Mr. Kim took me in. He pulled up architectural plans he'd found in the city archives. The tunnels connect to the warehouse district. We can come up inside the perimeter. Marcus looked at him differently. Respect replacing suspicion. You've been surviving your whole life, haven't you? We all have. Minjun stood, gathering the printouts. The difference is Zarya never learned she didn't have to do it alone. She's spent so long protecting everyone else, she forgot she deserves protection too. And you think you can teach her that by running into a trap? Minjun met his eyes. I think she's the most inspirational person I've ever met. She's fought a war most people don't even know exists. She's saved hundreds of children, but she's never let anyone save her. He grabbed his jacket. Maybe it's time someone tried. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he grabbed his gear. The team won't like this. They don't have to like it. They just have to move fast. Within the hour, they were mobile. 4 operatives, including Marcus and Adisa. Minjun in tactical gear that didn't quite fit. A borrowed vest heavy on his shoulders. The plan was desperate. Slip through the tunnels, create a diversion, extract both Zarya and Keto before Cade could execute either one. It was the kind of plan that only worked in movies or in the reckless calculations of desperate people, or in stories where hope refused to die. You know this is motivational in the worst way, right? Marcus said, as they drove through Seoul's afternoon traffic. The poor guy saves the Mafia queen. Very inspirational. Also very stupid. Min-jun almost smiled. I'll take stupid if it means they live. Adisa checked her weapon. For what it's worth, I didn't think you'd last a day, but you've got heart. She glanced at him. Soraya sees something in you. First time in years she's let anyone close. She deserves someone who sees her, Min-jun said quietly. Not just the queen, the person underneath. Most people can't handle the person underneath, Marcus muttered. She's got a lot of darkness. So do I just hide it better. Min-jun looked out the window at the passing city. We're all carrying things we wish we could put down. The question is whether we carry them alone or together. The harbor appeared on the horizon, dark water reflecting scattered lights, massive cranes looming like steel giants. Somewhere in those shadows, Zarya was walking into her own execution. And Keto, just a child who'd been brave when it mattered most, was waiting for a rescue that might never come. Min-jun's hands trembled slightly, not from fear, from purpose, from the absolute certainty that some things were worth dying for, and maybe, if they were lucky, worth living for too. Hold on, he thought, sending the prayer out into the universe. Both of you, just hold on a little longer. I'm coming. The harbor warehouse was exactly as brutal as Min-jun expected. Shipping containers stacked like metal mountains, floodlights cutting harsh angles through the darkness. And in the center, Jonas Cade, a man who looked more like a businessman than a monster. Zarya stood 20 feet from him, hands visible, no weapons. Keto was tied to a chair behind Cade, sobbing quietly. Ms. Okafor, Cade said pleasantly. So good of you to accept my invitation. Let the boy go. Zarya's voice was ice. Take me, that's what you want. Cade circled her slowly. What I want is for you to understand something. You can't save everyone. Some people are just inventory. He's a child. He's a complication. Cade gestured to one of his men. But I'm a man of my word. Once you're secured, he can leave. How generous. I thought so. Zarya's eyes flicked to Keto. The boy was terrified, shaking. She'd been that child once, helpless, forgotten. She wouldn't let it happen again, even if it cost her everything. But then, an explosion rocked the far end of the warehouse. Smoke billowed through the eastern entrance. Cade's men scattered, shouting. In the chaos, Min-jun emerged from the maintenance tunnel behind the containers. Marcus and the team flanking him. Zarya's eyes widened. What is he doing here? Min-jun moved fast. He reached Keto first, cutting the ropes while Marcus provided cover fire, precise, non-lethal shots to suppress Cade's guards. Min-jun scooped the boy into his arms. I've got you. You're safe. Keto clung to him. Brother Min-jun. Shh, I promised, remember? But Cade was already moving. He grabbed Zarya, a knife to her throat. Stop, or she dies. The warehouse went still. Min-jun set Keto down gently, pushing him toward Marcus. Then he stepped forward, hands raised. Let her go. Cade laughed. And why would I do that? Because the USB is already with Interpol. Min-jun's voice was steady. Every file, every name, every transaction. Your entire operation is finished. Cade's face darkened. You're bluffing. Am I? Min-jun pulled out his phone, showed him the confirmation email. They have everything, but if you kill her, you lose your only bargaining chip. Zarya stared at Min-jun. He'd played the only card that mattered. He'd gambled everything on Cade's self-interest. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Cade shoved Zaria forward. She stumbled, and Minjun caught her. Cade was already backing toward the exit. "This isn't over." "Yes," Zaria said quietly, "it is." Sirens wailed in the distance. Red and blue lights flashed outside. Interpol, coordinated by Marcus's contact. They swarmed the warehouse, and Cade's men surrendered without resistance. Jonas Cade was taken into custody, shouting threats that would never materialize. Zaria stood in the aftermath, breathing hard. Minjun was beside her, hand still on her arm. Around them, children were being brought out of hidden compartments, more than they'd known about. 37 names on a list, 37 lives now walking toward safety. "You came," Zaria said softly. "Of course I came." "You could have died." "So could you." Minjun turned to face her fully. "You were going to sacrifice yourself. That's what queens do." "No." His voice was gentle but firm. "That's what people do when they've forgotten they matter too." Zaria's breath hitched. No one had ever said that to her. Not in her entire life. She was the protector, the weapon, the solution, never the one worth protecting. But here was this man, poor, powerless by the world's standards, telling her she was worth saving. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "Do what?" "Let someone care." Minjun smiled, soft, real. "You start by not running." Zaria looked at him, really looked, saw not just the repairman, but the orphan who'd survived. The man who'd risked everything for children he didn't know. Who'd walked into her world and refused to be anything other than exactly who he was. Honest, kind, brave in ways that had nothing to do with violence. "You're insufferable," she said. "I know. And reckless. Also true. And you make me want to believe things I thought I'd forgotten." Her voice cracked, like hope and partnership and maybe something more. Minjun reached up, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Then believe it, because I'm not going anywhere." Dawn broke over the harbor in shades of amber and rose. The children were safe, every single one. Social workers and child welfare coordinators moved through the scene, offering blankets and gentle reassurances. Keto sat wrapped in a red blanket, holding a cup of hot chocolate, flanked by 2 counselors who spoke to him in soothing tones. Zaria and Minjun stood apart from the activity, watching. 37, Zaria said quietly. "Every name on that list. Plus the ones Cade was hiding." Minjun counted the small faces being loaded into safe transport vans. 52 total. 52 lives. "Yeah." Zaria was silent for a long moment. Then, "I don't understand you, Minjun Park." He glanced at her. "What's to understand?" "Why you helped. You didn't owe anyone anything. You could have destroyed that USB the moment you found it. Gone back to your quiet life." She turned to face him. "Why did you stay?" Minjun looked at the children. At Keto, who'd stopped crying and was now laughing softly at something one of the counselors said. "Because I was one of them," he said simply. "Cold, scared, wondering if anyone would ever look for me. But someone did. Eventually, the repair shop owner, Mr. Kim, he found me stealing circuit boards to sell. Instead of calling the police, he gave me a job." Minjun's voice was thick with emotion. "He said everyone deserves a chance, especially the ones the world forgot." Zaria felt something crack open in her chest. Not everyone has someone looking for them. No. Minjun met her eyes. But maybe that's why we look. For each other. For them. for all the versions of ourselves that are still waiting to be found. She let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. You remind me that the strongest thing we can do is leave no one behind. You already knew that. You've been doing it your whole life. Alone. Yeah. He smiled softly. But maybe you don't have to anymore. Zarya studied his face. This man who'd appeared in her life like an answered prayer she'd never dared to speak, who'd seen past the Mafia queen to the refugee child underneath, who'd offered partnership without demanding she be anything other than herself. What happens now? She asked. Min-jun shrugged. I go back to fixing laptops. You dismantle the rest of Cade's network. The world keeps turning. That's it? Unless. He took a small step closer. Unless we decide that this, he gestured between them, wasn't just circumstantial, that maybe in all the chaos we found something worth keeping. Zarya's heart hammered. Min-jun, you don't have to answer now. His voice was steady, patient. I know your life is complicated. I know I'm just a poor repairman who stumbled into your world. But stop. She reached out, taking his hand. You're not just anything. His breath caught. You're the person who saw 37 names and thought of them as children, not evidence. The person who stood between a frightened boy and violence without a second thought. The person who, her voice softened, who looked at me and saw someone worth saving. You are worth saving. I'm starting to believe that. Zarya squeezed his hand. Because of you. The moment stretched between them, warm and tentative. The beginning of something neither could name yet, but both recognized. Quito appeared at their side, still wrapped in the red blanket. He looked up at them with those wide, dark eyes. Are you leaving? Min-jun knelt down. Just for a little bit, but you'll be safe now, I promise. Quito grabbed both their hands, one small palm in Zarya's, one in Min-jun's, and pulled them closer together. You should stay together, he said seriously. You're both sad when you're alone. Out of the mouths of children, Zarya felt tears prick her eyes. Min-jun's hand tightened in Quito's grip. And in that moment, standing between a traumatized child and a future neither of them had planned, they understood something fundamental. Healing wasn't solitary, love wasn't weakness, and family didn't always arrive in expected forms. Sometimes it showed up as a USB drive in the rain, a mafia queen with a refugee's heart, a poor man with infinite courage, and a child who'd survived the unsurvivable, reminding them all what mattered. One of the counselors approached gently. Quito, it's time to go. The boy hesitated, looking between them. Will I see you again? Zarya crouched down, meeting him at eye level. Yes, I'll make sure of it. Promise? Promise. Quito hugged them both, quick, fierce, then followed the counselor to the waiting van. He turned once to wave. They waved back. When the van disappeared from view, Zarya and Min-jun were left standing alone in the breaking dawn. So, Min-jun said quietly, what now? Zarya turned to him. I have to finish dismantling Cade's network. It'll take months, maybe longer. Okay, it's dangerous work. I know. And I'm not easy to be with. I'm controlling, stubborn. I've spent my whole life pushing people away. Min-jun smiled. Good thing I'm stubborn too. She almost laughed. Almost. Min-jun, let's go together a little further, he said simply. Not as partners in crime, as partners in whatever this becomes. No expectations, no pressure, just forward. Zarya looked at him. at this impossibly kind, impossibly brave man who'd walked into her war and refused to become a casualty, who'd reminded her that strength and tenderness could coexist, that power didn't have to mean isolation, that maybe after a lifetime of walls, she could risk a door. "If you can bear a queen," she said softly, "I think I can manage." She smiled, a real smile, unguarded and warm. "Then yes, let's go together." 3 months later, Min Jun's repair shop had a new sign, Second Chances Electronics. The name had been Zaria's idea. Inside, the space was brighter, new lights, organized shelves, a small waiting area with comfortable chairs, and in the back room, a desk where Zaria sometimes worked when she wasn't dismantling trafficking networks across 3 continents. The door chimed. Keto walked in, carrying a backpack, followed by his new foster parents, a kind couple who'd been thoroughly vetted by Zaria's team. "Uncle Minjun," Keto ran forward. Minjun scooped him up. "Hey buddy, how's school?" "Good, I got an A on my English test." "That's amazing." Zaria emerged from the back room, carrying 2 cups of tea. She set them down and ruffled Keto's hair. "Proud of you, little man." Keto beamed. Then, with the unfiltered honesty of a child, he said, "Are you married yet?" The foster parents laughed. Minjun and Zaria exchanged glances. "Not yet," Zaria said. "But maybe someday," Minjun added. "Good," Keto nodded seriously. "Because you're better together." He wasn't wrong. As the foster family left, plans to meet for dinner that weekend already confirmed, Minjun and Zaria stood in the doorway of the shop, watching Seoul's evening lights flicker to life. "You know," Minjun said, "this isn't how I expected my life to turn out." "Better or worse?" "Infinitely better." Zaria leaned against him, just slightly. "Yeah, me too." And there, in the gentle hum of the repair shop, surrounded by broken things being made whole again, they understood what they'd been building all along. Not just romance, though there was that, tender and true. Not just partnership, though they'd earned that through fire. But something deeper, more lasting, a family stitched together from orphans and refugees, and all the forgotten ones who'd refused to stay forgotten. A home built not on power or wealth, but on the quiet, revolutionary act of choosing each other every day, through danger and peace, through healing and hope, together. If this story touched your heart tonight, share it with someone who needs to remember that love can find us even in the darkest places. That courage isn't about never being afraid. It's about protecting what matters anyway. That family isn't always born. Sometimes it's built by hands that refuse to let go. Subscribe for more stories that honor dignity, celebrate resilience, and always, always end in hope. Because these nights are made for believing that tomorrow can be better. And you're the reason these stories matter. Thank you for being here, for listening, for staying until the very end, for believing that even the broken can be made whole again. Until next time, hold on to your hope, hold on to each other, and remember, you are never too broken to deserve love. Good night.